Hello and welcome to Infinity. I'm Charlie Seraphin. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about numbers. Our guest is Joe Ivory, a San Francisco businessman who's been studying, teaching, and lecturing in the area of numerology since 1974. Numerology is the study of numbers. What is a number?
Well, a number essentially, Charlie, is two things to many people. It's both a qualitative and a quantitative type of integer. It represents to some people, like if you have eggs, 2 eggs plus 2 eggs equal 4 eggs. So they have 4. They know that they have 4 separate objects. But to a numerologist, a qualitative reading would be that you've got 2 eggs perhaps that are bad and 2 eggs that are good. So what you do with number is you look at both sides. You have the positive and negative qualities of a number. I don't use numbers as a sense in a counting or adding way, but I attribute traits of consciousness to numbers. The quality of a number. When I look at a person's chart in numerological parlance, I take a look at what particular numbers they're consistent of. If they have in their name, let's say, a number 1, it shows that they're strong and they're aggressive, they're forceful, powerful. If they have a number 2, they're very gentle, very giving, very conciliatory and peacemaking. And that's the way the numbers develop through the 9 basic numbers that you use in numerology.
Is there any, when scientists use numbers, they primarily are interested in the quantitative and not the qualitative?
That's correct.
And for you to ascribe a qualitative value to numbers would be illogical for many people. To say 4 is 4, what do you mean it's a good 4 or a bad 4? Or it means half good, half bad, or whatever. How do you resolve that sort of conflict and discussion with people? Obviously, you're in the business community and you deal with people who deal with numbers every day.
Right.
Most times they think of it in the quantitative and not the qualitative sense.
Well, it's true, because in the business community you really cannot speak of the quality of numbers. It's in the metaphysical community, in the consciousness arts, in the search to gain enlightenment, that this particular style of numerological interpretation comes forward. It's important that a person, if he's pursuing some sort of enlightenment or helpful education to try to find out spiritually where he is, to gain an understanding of numerology, which gets him into knowing his traits of consciousness, his qualities of consciousness. You can have a person who's a number 1 who is very egotistical. He can be very bullying. Or you can have a number 1 that's very helpful and very positive and very outgoing. So in numerology, we go back to the very, very beginning, where we understand the teachings of Pythagoras, who was the essential beginning or popularization of numerology. Back in the 5th century BC, about 590, I would think, he was born. And his particular sojourn through life, from place to place, learning from this wisdom school or that wisdom school in Egypt and Chaldea and India and China and the different places that he traveled, enabled him to understand what we call the ancient wisdom, the mysteries, the understanding of the universe, how the soul evolves, how God evolves, and what consciousness beyond the normal everyday human consciousness represents. And that's how numerology comes in.
If a person were to go to school and were taking a course in mathematics and someone started discussing Pythagorean theory, would they be talking about that evolution? They wouldn't. What is it? What is it in basic textbook terms?
In basic textbook terms, Pythagoras, of course, was responsible for the geometry of thinking, how spatial degrees and quantities could be arrived at. That was the exoteric side of him. The esoteric side of his teachings dealt with the spiritual development of a human being. That's the side that I deal with. The everyday, quantitative and useful outgoing number quality is really not what we work with. Pythagoras developed an understanding, and he taught this in the wisdom school that he established when he was 60 years old in Crotona in Italy, a Dorian colony in the coast of Italy. He established the understanding that God's nature was essentially consistent of 9 basic personality traits. Now, these personality traits could be manifested in a positive or negative way, and he assigned qualities to each of the 9 basic numbers that he assigned to the personality traits. A 1 was a very inventive and creative and ingenious type of person. had a lot of initiative and forthright quality, forcefulness. The number 2 was very gentle and loving, as we described before, and very conciliatory and anxious to assist other people. It's the male and female, the yin and the yang, the 1 and the 2. The 1 is like the hand that seeks the glove, which is the number 2. The quality of the number 3 in numerology represents creative artistic self-expression, the ability to have a feeling of artistic ability to communicate, to paint, to dance, to sing, to be a person involved in drama or in color, anything of that nature. So 3 is attributed to the quality of being social and happy and outgoing. The 4 is just the opposite. It's a contiguous number with number 3 because they share an edge. They stand side by side in the sequential numbers. 4 is very serious, and 3 is very lighthearted. 4 is very applied and constructive, whereas number 3 is sometimes scattering its talents, doing 100 different things at one time. 4 believes in doing something thoroughly and methodically, systematically, with a disciplined and constructive view. And sometimes its visionary quality, which the number 3 has, is limited because the 4 is focusing on one thing. The number 5 in numerology represents personal freedom, the ability, like the 3, to cover many different areas. The 5 is a typical salesman, the promoter, the person who is a publicist, who is involved in advertising and dealing with the public. So 5 is like mercury. You can't put your finger or thumb on a ball of mercury on a table because it simply will not be restricted. So 5 is a personality trait that he attributed to the ability to seek personal freedom, to use your mind, and to travel and to touch everything that life has to offer. The number 6 represents the qualities of service to mankind and love and domesticity. 6 is like the mother hen or the cosmic parent, the caretaker of humanity, the teacher and the counselor. So when you find a 6 in a person's name, it represents that need to reach out like a doctor, a nurse, a welfare worker, or a social worker, and do something and contribute toward the benefit of the whole. The number 7 in numerology, reaching toward our 9th number, represents, like the 7th day of the week, a time of introspection and thought, a time of analysis, a time of looking inside yourself and relating as to how you fit into the universe with God, what your role is. So 7 becomes a very analytical, a very perfectionistic, a very research-oriented, and a very thoughtful type of placid number. 7s are sometimes accused of being disinterested and exclusive and aloof. But 7 really is the type of number that needs time to ponder and to meditate and to go inside of itself for answers. So the 7 is always seen as a very stoic, intellectual, analytical, and introspective and investigative number. The number 8, that's the power and authority and control of a person who's an executive or a manager or a controller, or a person who is directing situations that require commercial investment of money and assets and time. So number 8 is always, when you find it in a person's nature, a number that indicates that they're very strong and they want to attain materially, to be successful, competitive. It's a very strong quality. And then the final number, number 9, represents total benevolent human feeling toward the pathos and the pathos of life, wanting to reach out and uplift, wanting to give comfort, wanting to teach, and wanting to enfold everything that life has in a philanthropic way toward the benefit of mankind. And that's essentially what Pythagoras attributed to the 9 basic numbers.
This is News 74, KCBS in San Francisco. You're listening to Infinity and a discussion with Joe Ivory about numerology. How do you get from the number to, you say, if it has the number in a name or if it has the character of that number involved in it? How do you make those associations?
The system that is currently used, which is a kind of an outgrowth of the original Pythagorean method, which is not used at this time, but this is using the traits that Pythagoras had attributed to the numbers. The system we use now is that you have essentially these 9 numbers that are symbols, because a symbol, the number doesn't have power in and of itself. It's a symbol of a power or a quality that is resident in each of us in a spiritual way. It's a personality trait, in other words. Because we're made in the image of God, supposedly we have these qualities resident within our nature to develop. They lie latent there. And what we do is assign the number according to the letter in the alphabet. In other words, an A is a 1, a B is a 2, a 3 is a C, a 4 is a D, and so on. You go right down the line until you get to your 9th letter, which is I. Then the J becomes a 1 again. and the K a 2, and so on, right to the end of the alphabet. We end with the 26th letter, which we add together, 2 and 6 of the 26, to make it an 8. So the Z from that point on is an 8, just as the 13th letter, the M, is called a 4. So we go through a person's full name at birth, because the full name at birth represents the total qualities of consciousness that have been accumulated and brought forth in this concept of reincarnation, which Pythagoras incidentally was one of the fosters of. He believed and practiced and taught. And he said that as a soul evolves through consciousness from its very first beginnings and comes through centuries of living, that it begins to develop a sense of what life is all about, what giving is all about, and he takes himself off of self-center and begins to help other people as he evolves. So each one of the letters that you have within your name at birth represent an accumulated trait of consciousness or personality trait you have worked through and been in every lifetime that you've lived. If you're missing any numbers, and this is interesting, then you show in this lifetime, let's say you're missing the number 7 or a letter G, P, and Y, which would be a number 7 in the alphabet. It would indicate that you're missing that particular trait of consciousness and becomes a karmic lesson. It shows that in your past lives you avoided or had difficulty with or neglected learning the lesson of the 7, which incidentally the 7 to reflect is a studious, spiritual, scientific, philosophical person who takes time to analyze and to understand what life is all about.
Does that suggest that an individual's name should contain all of the basic primary numbers?
That suggests that the individual is striving through the countless lifetimes that he is attempting to live on this earth to try to develop each of those traits of consciousness so that he has, in the final analysis, reached a point of expertise in understanding and knowing and integrating within his being all of the 9 basic traits of personality that a soul needs to go on and to graduate, as they say, from this wheel of incarnation and to move into higher responsibilities in the eternity spheres that God has established in what we call the spiritual realms or in the heavens and so forth, because there are many seats of management responsibility that supposedly await the fully evolved soul when he reaches that point.
What if your parents make a mistake and mess up when they give you your name? Or in our instances, your given name was Joseph and you much prefer and are much more comfortable with Joe, and mine was Charles and I'm much more comfortable with Charlie, and we both use them effectively in our daily existence.
Well, this
is there a significance there?
Yeah, there is a significance there. This is an interesting point that everyone inquires on because they're curious as to how, let's say, a nurse could have named you, how that nurse would have any semblance of understanding as to what you as the incoming personality were anything or even close to being. Well, here again we go back to this teaching that Pythagoras established in his mystic schools, that each soul, being consistent of the nature of God, has in and of himself a certain electrical quality, and this quality, which is given off, is able to be received by the person naming the soul. It's an electrical field that has a certain oscillation, just as this radio station sends out through its tower a certain signal. So the soul sends out a signal that is felt in the subconscious subjective equipment of the person naming the child. If you go down a list of names and when you're about to name a child and you say this name and phonetically it doesn't sound right, then you go through another and that's all right, but you finally pronounce a name that feels good, feels harmonic to you. What you're doing is, it's taught, that you're tapping into the very quality that's being transmitted from this little electrical soul that's about to integrate itself with the body of the newly formed child in the mother's womb. So the name then that is picked because the quality that the person picking the name has feels like it harmonizes, feels right. And in most cases, in almost 98% of the cases, this is correct. So the soul comes in with a name that properly annotates and properly describes the quality that it is attempting to manifest in this particular life.
Could we go through real quickly? You went through the numbers and the significance of each of the digits. Could you talk about how one would analyze his or her own name in ascribing those? Do you simply write out the name and put the number over the letter, and when you get to 9 you start over again with the alphabet? And then do you total those numbers, or do you just look at them and make sure that you've got one of each?
The typical way of doing it, as they call so-called Pythagorean, which is a more modern system, is that you put your entire name as given on your birth certificate on a sheet of paper. Then you assign these numerical symbols according to their position in the alphabet. According to A would be a 1, you'd place the 1 above the letter. And if you had a C, you'd place the 3, which is the third letter, below the letter. And the reason for doing that is that all the vowels in your name have to be placed above, the numbers have to be placed above the vowel. All the consonants be placed below. And the reason for that is that the vowels represent the higher spiritual voice of your soul. It's that little part of you, that inner voice that you listen to sometimes and probably don't pay attention to, as most of us don't, because what we're trying to do is satisfy the everyday feelings and urges of our emotions and our desires. The consonants represent those desires. You put the number for each of the consonants below and you look at them separately, but you also total the consonants as you do total the vowels, and you get a final number. The vowels, again, are like Jiminy Cricket. They're Pinocchio's guide to proper action. The vowels are conduits, are channels through which your soul speaks to you through the inner voice, the conscience. The consonants are that part of you that are the biological and material urges that you brought forth from every lifetime that you ever had. They're the part that is referred to by L. Ron Hubbard in Dianetics as the reflexive or responsive or automatic self. That part of you that is looked upon as being the old tape by a psychologist. That part that runs rampant for sometimes without control and without direction. So the consonants represent the body corporal, the feelings, the passions, the urges, and the desires. And the vowels represent the higher self. Now when you total those together, the total of the vowels that's a keynote. In music you might refer to it as like the key of C. You may not have any C individual notes or individual vowels being played in that chord, but when it's played it comes out to a single particular number that represents the keynote or the urge or the index of what your soul's trying to get across to you in this incarnation, what it's trying to tell you. And it's the urge that you follow toward the aims and objectives and goals that you try to fulfill. The consonants, that's how you appear to other people. That's known as your personality number. It's the impression you make on others, the image you project, and the quality of your facial language, your body language, the way your voice comes across. They can sense things from you through your emotions, and that's the consonants. Then you merge those all together and add vowels and consonants together straight across. And the final number that you get when you merge that is your character number. And the character number represents your talents, your skills, your abilities, the way that you express yourself, the way people see you accomplish things in life. And that is what some numerologists call your destiny number. Destiny, inasmuch as that's the number that will be good vocationally for you, that's the number that you will pursue in life occupations and interests. That's the way, in this particular codified system of numerology we're using, that it seems to come down into an understanding of how we manifest our strengths, weaknesses, abilities, and how our soul speaks to us.
Are there people who would have only vowels in their names and no consonants?
It's possible, but I doubt very much that that would happen, because it's necessary that a person have both the consonant quality, which is the more material and emotional self, mixed with the higher. I doubt very much that you'd find anybody with that, because a vowel is a very, very highly tuned type of religious or spiritual or divine type of quality. In Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Jewish Bible, you'll find no vowels written in any of the words. You'll find only consonants. And the reason for that is that the profane may not open the scrolls and may not view without education, without prompting, or without training, that each word, when spoken, has to be, because the person, the rabbi or the student, has to be able to know how to apply the vowels, because vowels are very high indications of God's emotion and will. If you're writing a letter, if you're Jewish, you will write God, G-D. The O will not be there, simply because it is a vowel and it indicates strengths coming from God, and you don't show that on paper.
I'm curious about the nicknames or the change of names after the given names of... and you went from Joseph to Joe. You dropped consonants. You got rid of 3 of them. Is there a conscious reason for that, or have you been able to go back after the fact and say why you might have done that?
Yeah, people that change their name or take on a nickname are doing this essentially because they don't care for the everyday association with the energy of the numbers that are, of course, added up, the vowels added up and the consonants added up. But the name Joe will accomplish for the soul certain opportunities. It will attract certain things into the life of the person called Joe or the person called Charlie that will enable you to learn additional lessons for the soul. Because when we come in as newly born personalities, we come in with the intention that this incarnation will be a time of learning and understanding new and experiential situations. So by taking on another name than the one that you were given at birth, it gives you another view or another way of associating and seeing the things that life has to offer so that you can learn. That's why a name would be changed.
What about News 74? See a lot of 7s and 4s in there, which is the intellectual, introspective, and also the organized approach that you talked about in the 4.
That's right.
Which kind of describes our format.
So what you're doing there is you're taking a 7 and a 4, which, as you say, are very intellectual and very spiritual and very highly attuned to accuracy, to intelligence, to a feeling of being involved in the more elite and the more, what should I say, inspirational things of life. Because when you add a 7 and 4 together, what you get is a number 11. And a number 11 is a graduate level, actually a graduate level, I say that in jest, but it's a higher master number of the number 2. Because when you add 1 and 1 of the 11 together, you get a 2. In numerology, there are 2 master numbers, the 11 and the 22, that we deal with. The 11 is an idealist. Anything, person, or situation that is addressed or associated with the 11 has a quality of being a light bearer unto the masses, a revelator of facts, knowledge, and information, a person or a group or a situation that attempts to help those who are lesser evolved, to enlighten those who are seeking, to teach, to inspire. That's what the 11 would be. And you're doing that with a 7, which is very analytical, very investigative, very perfectionistic, and very, very refined and classical. And you're doing that with the 4, which is organized and structured and disciplined and has a sense of order about it. And when you combine the 2, this is what you've got. You've got a kind of a light, as if a moth is being attracted to a light that is a very charismatic quality that shines out and inspires and uplifts.
What about other double-digit numbers? You mentioned 22. Are there any other numbers? When you get to the Z, you do something different in the alphabet than you do with any others. Other special quality numbers?
Yeah, each compound number, like a 13, 14, 15, all of those, are not what you'd call special numbers, but each one of them has a different quality. Like your 13th letter, when added together, the M, is called a 4, but it's really a 13. Now, the 4th letter, D, is a 4, and a 4 has its separate traits and personality. It's very hardworking and very plodding and very organized and disciplined. But the 13, although a 4, has a 1 and a 3 involved in it, and that makes that 13 a bit, I would say, a little more signatory or special, because the 3 is creative, artistic self-expression. It communicates, it's artistic, it's deep feeling, and the 1 is very independent and very forward-moving and original and creative. And you combine those 2 qualities that come out as a 4, which is a very structured and a very thorough, but has the creative activity in it that wasn't in the 4. But the 22, to cover that off as a master number, is the number of the 4, but on a graduate level, on a higher, more illuminated level. And the 22 has the ability to be a practical idealist, a master builder, to use the principles of logic and organization and pragmatist style thinking to be able to reach out to the world and to uplift in that way, to be a very high accomplishing individual, to head up huge groups that will benefit others, that type of thing. Whereas a number 4 would be a good manager and a good statistician or a good practical worker. The number 2 ascribes itself more to the masses and to the uplift of the masses.
What about things that happen in cycles? Every 4 years we elect a president. Every 20 years since the beginning of the country, a president has died in office. Is there a significance? Some people would say that's just random chance.
Some people would say that, and in many instances it is random chance. But there is a thing cyclical in this life that we refer to in numerology as being the cycle of the years that each of us goes through. The number 9 is the final number of a series that begins with 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are a cycle that is existent everywhere in nature and in human life. The human being in numerology goes through, with each of his lives, from the 1st to the 9th, a series of different year instances and qualities that he cycles through. By taking a person's month and day of birth and adding it together, such as my month and day, which is October 12, the answer you get is a 4. You take that number and add it to the year that you're in, and you get a number that is called your personal year. And this is a very important number in numerology because it tells you where you are in the cycle of development of the 9-year cycle that you go through. If you were in a 1 personal year, you would be starting new things and facing in new directions and beginning a new chapter in your life. If you were in a 2 personal year, it would be a time when you'd have to slow up and let things happen under the surface. Many things will be coming about that you may be anxious to put forth, but you have to be patient. It's a time of understanding, a time of assimilating knowledge and facts, and a time of being patient. The 3, if you're in a 3 personal year, it's a time when you're branching out and expanding and being creative and artistic. If you're in a 4 year, it's a time when you're being tested. It's a time when you have to organize your life and get a good, firm foundation and put roots in and not spend in a frivolous way, but organize your finances, your thinking, and the resources of your existence. In a 5 personal year, it would be time to branch out and to expand. And all this relates, incidentally, back to Tarot. It relates back to astrology. Everything seems to come together because, especially in a 5 year, it's a time to look for new things and to try to bring new life into your organization or into your life. In a 6 personal year, it's a time to look toward your family and your happiness and the domesticity of your job and everything that has to do with bringing happiness and peace and balance into your existence. In a 7 personal year, it's a time to examine where you are, what you've done, to sort out the efforts of your life, to see if you're happy with where you've come and where you want to go. Make plans, short range and long range. In an 8 personal year, it's a time to take charge of your life and stand up and tell people that this is what I want, this is what I will achieve, and you gain recognition and you gain sometimes success monetarily and also in position. It's a time of reaping the fruit or the benefits and the efforts of everything that you've sown in the years before. Then when you're in a 9 personal year, that's a time of endings. You have to be willing to let go of things that aren't productive, that are restricting you, that are holding you back, to let go of issues or habits or ideas that are no longer useful to you. And then in the next year, you're in a 1 personal year, you begin again. I'm very happy to say that I'm entering into a 1 personal year in 1986. So for me, this is a time of rebirth. It's a time of coming, having gone through a cycle of 9, I'm being reborn at a higher level, understanding all the experiences and feelings I've had through the 9, and with the 1 starting again and then moving on into the 2 and 3 and developing. We do this every 9 years.
In our final seconds, is there an overall significance for the year 1986 that would apply to all individuals, or does it depend individually on when you were born?
It does have a general significance. 1986, when added together, comes out to 6. And 6, as mentioned in the previous description, is a time of finding peace. It's a time of finding balance and equilibrium. It's a time of reaching out toward others and trying to have them understand where you're coming from and trying to generally, and I see the world doing this now, find a proper balance and a happiness that all can benefit from.
This is Infinity. Remember to keep your mind open and listen to your heart. I'm Charlie Seraphin. Thank you for listening.